Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, episode 525. We got a job to do. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters. Today, I will continue with our perceived reputation. Here, I look at the emphasis one places on reputation, whether it's in regards to oneself or society, and what the consequences of emphasizing reputation might be. Then it's on to we got a job to do. Here, I take a look at our environment, our air, land, and water, and what we could do about it. Today's show will feature background footage from the Mount Sissy Trail near Skinny Dip Falls. To get there, take the Blue Ridge Parkway heading south from US 276. Once you pass Pounding Mill Overlook, it's of maybe 2 or 3 miles on the right. There'll be a small dirt pull-off on the right. Then you'll see a couple of trails. The one I took is the one on the right as you face the woods. Then, at the end of that trail, which only goes a short way, you take a left. At the end of that trail, another left, and then a right. And you're on your way to Skinny Dip Falls. Also, I took another trail down to the stream. Skinny Dip Falls, well, is not the same. Hurricane Helene changed the structure of the stream. In years past, there was a beautiful deep water pool, perhaps 5 or 10 feet deep, perfect for swimming. Now that pool is gone. Perhaps it's only 2 or 3 feet deep. It's all different now. So now, let's continue with our perceived reputation. And it might really cost us. Perhaps there will be food rotting in the fields as there's no one to pick it. It's probably already happening. But what is this all for? And of course, a lot of illegal immigrants work in many industries, from hotels, restaurants, and many other places. So a lot of places will suffer, including our food supply. Why? Well, is our reputation as a society? We want to look good by having less immigrants. Perhaps it will make us feel better about ourselves with less immigrants around, especially illegal immigrants. But this seems a little stupid and a little pretentious, especially when you look at how much they truly contribute to society. Probably contributing much more than any harm they might bring. Of course, Trump always emphasizes the harm and hardly ever emphasizes the good they do, when in fact they do much more good than harm. These illegal immigrants and immigrants in general. So we have to look at what we're trying to do here, getting rid of immigrants. We're just trying to make our society more white. Is that the goal? And if so, Well, what's that going to bring? What's the great end result of that? Are we going to be a Christian nation? Are we going to have to all go to church to defend our reputation? Are we going to have to modify our beliefs and behaviors to defend our and build up our reputation? Or we have to pretend to believe things we don't and do things we don't want to do? Also, so we might have a better job or better opportunities in other things. Is it really worth the sacrifice? Does anybody ever talk about this? Did you ever hear about this in your life? Perhaps a few times. Perhaps from classmates in middle school or something like that, or in high school. And perhaps you dismissed them a long time ago, as now you're in your 40s and 50s. Well, sure, you might have the nice home and the nice wife and nice job, but is there a nagging sense of disillusionment? A nagging sense that you can't do everything you want to do? Or a nagging sense that you compromised your beliefs? Or at least you act like you have to other people and pretend to them you have other beliefs that you might not have? Or perhaps you really did change your beliefs. But what about how you thought before? When you were younger, perhaps only a teenager or a child. And is that perspective valid? Well, perhaps it is. Did I pull it off? Maintaining the same attitude as I did about things when I was a kid and a teenager, and didn't make all these compromises to have a good reputation? Did I pull it off? Yeah, I think I did. Well, did you? Well, therein hangs the tale. Unfortunately, probably a lot of people didn't pull it off. And they compromised who they are to have a better reputation, to advance themselves in society, so to speak. And perhaps it was all worth it. I'm not saying it always ends up in disillusionment or sadness. A lot of times it works out wonderful, defending your reputation and modifying your beliefs. I'm just saying there's a potential for things to go wrong and for disillusionment to occur. That's all I'm saying. And the reason I'm saying that is because you don't hear that from hardly anybody else, except maybe your classmate in middle school or high school or something like that. But anyway, and so life goes on. For in the long run, we have to look at all this and look at it from a spiritual aspect. We might think we're leading ourselves in the right direction by defending our reputation, and we might even think we have better spiritual beliefs too. And perhaps that is the case. However, it might not always be. It might seem on the surface that you have better spiritual beliefs, but once you look at the consequences of those beliefs and perhaps the hypocrisy that is well demonstrated by some people who might have similar beliefs to you, perhaps people in your own church or own religion might have hypocritical behavior that might have negative consequences for many people. So we have to kind of step back and make sure that's not happening. That our religious belief is not just a veneer hiding cruel hypocrisy underneath. Something to think about. We have to take a long, hard look at who we are, how we see ourselves, and how we see others from our family, friends, life partners, and society at large. And just make sure that we're not being pretentious about it too much as an individual or even as a society. 4, we have to look at our perceived reputation. Now it is time for We Got a Job to Do. Well, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about a song by Neil Young, Be the Rain. I guess it came out in the late 80s, early 90s, something like that. It's a great song about the environment and activism. I recently saw Neil Young in concert in Charlotte on August 8th, 2025, where he did Be the Rain and many other good songs. He had this wicked looking microphone stand. On the top were 3 microphones. Usually he sang into the one in the middle. When he would jump to the one, well, I guess it would be on his left, it would turn into a megaphone. And about halfway down the mic stand, which was made out of metal and had all sorts of projections coming out of it, metal projections, almost knife-like blades, but there was a megaphone about halfway down the mic stand. And when he talked on the microphone on the left, the megaphone would sound. His voice would come out of the megaphone. And the megaphone would rotate, going back and forth, perhaps rotating once a second or so, providing an interesting audio effect with the megaphone. So he would go back and forth between a regular microphone and a megaphone, at least with some of his songs. Other songs were all microphone. Anyway, so it was a great show. And with the backup band Love Earth singing about the environmental movement, and Neil Young himself singing about the environment and what we need to do. Well, it was more than a concert. Sure, the music was great, the company great, but there's a mission here that was sang about. So now I talk about it. Sure, the mission is real. The mission is relevant. We got a job to do. So, talking about the earth. As in the song, we got a job to do. We got to save Mother Earth. Yes, from Be the Rain by Neil Young. So let's focus on that job. Well, there's 2 parts to it. First, there's the reason to do the job, and then the job itself. What to do. Well, let's focus on the reason to do the job. The reason to save Mother Earth. Gee, that sounds like a heavy lift. Do we really need to do it? Is it that important? Perhaps it is. And perhaps it's already too late. But better late than never. Better to try to save us now. Make an attempt to improve things on our planet now so we'll have less consequences down the road than ignoring the problem and having things get much worse. If we do something, perhaps it won't be as bad. So what do we got to do? We got to do a lot. What do we got to, what's the problems? And what do we got to tackle? Here they come. So let's start with it. The earth itself. The earth. The ultimate commonality. What I mean by that, by the word commonality, gee, I don't know if it's even a word, but what it means to me is basically what you have in common and the state of it. And I guess the state of what you have in common and the state of your relationship with people as you discuss what you have in common or what you do about what you have in common. But basically, it's what you have in common. The commonality, something that binds us. Obviously, it's many things. We might like the same music. We might have the same hobby. We might have the same job or go to the same school. Well, there's lots we could have in common with someone. Sure. But if you look at it at the ultimate level, what we all, underlining all of us, have in common is the earth. No matter what our religion is, where we live, our socioeconomic status, or whatever, the earth is what we have in common. The ultimate commonality. It truly binds us all. Sure. So, because it's the ultimate commonality, the one thing we really, everyone on the planet has in common is that we live here. Well, it should be our first priority to make sure the earth is okay, which it is not. So, let's describe it. Well, in the song, Be the Rain, an inspirational environmental song by Neil Young, well, he talks about be the rain, be the river. Well, there's a lot of things you could be. First, I didn't quite get it. Be the river. Sounds a little goofy. However, I think what Neil Young means to say is have empathy to the river's situation. Think about the river's situation. So, let's do that. Sure, I remember, quote, the river's situation in the distant past. Being 64 years old, I remember what it was like in the late 60s and early 70s. Well, what happened is, in the late 60s, I went to New York City with my family. We lived in Huntington, Long Island. So maybe an hour or so commute to the city. Anyway, I remember crossing into New York City, I guess from Brooklyn or Queens. And we're crossing over to Manhattan on a bridge. And then I remember it was either shortly before or after the bridge, I guess, or maybe during the bridge as well. I could smell it. To me, as a 7-year-old, it smelled like exploding sewers. Like sewers leaking out into those streets. It was an awful smell. Anyway, in more recent journeys to the city, I don't notice that smell. Anyway, and I remember the Shenandoah River in Biltmore Village near Asheville, North Carolina in the early 70s. I remember crossing the river on a bridge, in our car. However, there was often a traffic jam, so sometimes we crossed the river very slowly. And if you had the windows down, well, you could smell it once again. Exploding sewers! A common theme perhaps back then. The river smelt awful. It truly was polluted. Now it doesn't smell like exploding sewers. Now it is better. Was sure. Of course, Donald Trump is doing everything he can to undermine environmental rules and regulation. Perhaps that water might once again be polluted or more polluted in the future. We have to have empathy for the river, for the water quality, and we have to think of what lives in the river. Sure, for the river is getting polluted by many things, including agricultural runoff. Sure, agricultural runoff from factory farms. So, we have herbicides, insecticides, and lots of fertilizer. And that fertilizer causes algae to multiply. The algae, although it produces oxygen, also consumes oxygen, particularly at night. Well, what it boils down to, at least as far as the water itself concerns, with this extra algae living in the water, it depletes the water of oxygen. It consumes more oxygen than it gives off, as far as the water is concerned. Perhaps in the air there might be a net gain of oxygen, but a net loss of oxygen for the water. So you lead to eutrophication, a lack of oxygen. This kills off fish and other water life. It's a bad situation. You end up having a dead river or a dead lake, whatever body of water you're dealing with that's fresh. And so, well, let's move on to the land. Well, we have insects in ecosystem collapse. Once again, going back to the late 60s and early 70s, perhaps the 80s, seems to me there are a lot more insects out there, especially closer to urban areas. Now, most of the insects seems to be in rural areas or in the woods or in other wild areas, where before there were insects more common everywhere. Well, I guess you might notice it on the road. In the distant past, in the 70s, there were more bugs splatter on your windshield than it seems to be in modern times. Perhaps the insects are dying. They are dying. The populations of bees and many other insects are declining. Some species are dying off, becoming extinct. Many species of animals and plants are becoming extinct. It's insects, animals, plants. They're all becoming extinct for various reasons, from pollution to global warming and other things. leading to an ecosystem collapse. Perhaps we might become extinct. We're in a great mass extinction event. There were several of them on this planet, and we're in one right now. Lots of plants, animals, insects dying off. Perhaps humankind will die off too. We need to wake up here and realize that the earth is the most important thing. We could deal rather with other political things later. Such as education and immigration, what to do with homelessness, what to do about Medicare, the economy, interest rates, national debt, whatever, wars, all of that's secondary. We'll deal with that later. What we need to deal with first, and what everybody, from Republicans to Democrats to everybody on the earth, should be on board with, is improving the environment. We really need to do this. This is a full alarm situation. This is serious. The damage is already done, and the damage could get much worse if we don't take steps to correct things now. We can't let President Trump get away with environmental deregulation. We must have regulation to protect the environment and to make sure greedy corporations don't pollute too much. Sure. Or create too much global warming, or use too much water, or whatever. Sure. Because agriculture uses a lot of water. And sometimes the water's just not there, especially in situations of drought, such as in the West, where they have had a prolonged drought. In the Colorado
Casey Waters Show. Producer Casey Waters. Graphic editing Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, CaseyWaters2 @CaseyWaters.com.